Okay, just checking on everything, making sure everything is working correctly here. Nope, it's not. All right, bear with me, folks. I did this last time, and I told myself I wasn't going to do this again. I was going to have this thing figured out. Let's see. Oh, I think I do. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Back to Win or Learn. And if I'm not showing up on YouTube, at least I'm showing up on Facebook. That much I know. So if you're on YouTube, if I would say if you can't hear me, you can't see me, then of course you wouldn't know what I'm saying right now. All right, I'm just going to hope for the best here and hope everything is working. Yeah, man, I think that I would have this down by now, but it's like Star Trek. I don't know if there's still some incarnation of Star Trek on TV anymore these days. Don't really watch TV. Didn't really watch Star Trek. I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but that's what it feels like. I have all these buttons to push, and I've got 3 recording devices going on. So it's a little intimidating to me, actually. I'm more used to like just camera stuff, and I'll figure it out from there. But I got a lot more stuff going on here. Anyway, I hope everybody's week has been a good week, a good productive week. And I had a good week. I have a nice little story to tell. So last time I was doing this, we could say podcast or live that I was doing, I was talking a lot about a guy named Jason Flayliam, and I feel really bad because I feel like I say his last name different every single time. And I need to get this right because, first of all, this is public. And then second of all, this is where my story is going. I mentioned on the live last week, that, hey, I'm shamelessly plugging this guy and I'm not getting paid for plugging his book or his work or his training that he does. And I even said this. I said, well, if anyone out there knows him and tell him that I'm I'm interested in interviewing him. Well, nobody came back to me. Nobody said, hey, yeah, no, Jason, let's, we can do this thing you can do this interview. But what I did do is, I purchased some of his online training, which, by the way, is just dynamite. I think I dove into it. I might have gotten into it last week, but I'm like midway through it now, and it's just absolutely it's digital marketing, but it's some of the best sales training I've ever learned. The book is one of the best sales books that I've ever read. And then, like I said, the training is amazing. So the support person, they're very good, by the way, at his company, writes me and says, how is everything? Do you have any questions? Anything I can help you with? And I wrote back and I said, yeah, I know these emails don't really get to Jason, but would you forward this email to him? And I went on saying, hey, Jason, I don't expect you to remember me when we met at the Traffic and Conversion. I'm sure you met a lot of people. However, I went on about how much I liked his material, his content, what he's teaching. And would you do an interview with me for my YouTube channel? And the assistant comes back and says, Jason's interested in doing the interview. And yeah, excited is an understatement. And I didn't even know who this guy was 1 month ago. And now I've just been consuming nonstop his material because it's so refreshing when it comes to persuasion and influence. It's so refreshing to have a new voice out there, a young voice too. He's only 36, I think. I'll ask him on the interview. But to have such a fresh voice when it comes to sales. And I encounter this all the time. I encounter this feeling in myself, and I have clients who complain about the same thing, and that is they don't want to feel salesy, whenever they're persuading or influencing. And by the way, this is the digital stuff is no different. That is influence, and we even call them influencers. So I think people want to draw a dividing line between sales and online influence, like Casey Neistat online influence, like any of your vloggers out there. I don't really follow too many vloggers. Casey's probably the only one, but we try to say, or we try to tell ourselves that this doesn't involve sales. And I think a lot of people get into digital marketing. Well, I would say the surprise that it has been for me is, and one of the reasons why I think a lot of digital marketers aren't that effective is because they have no sales training. Most of them have no sales training. And I think they went into digital marketing so they wouldn't have to sell anything person to person. But think about this. If you're a digital marketer out there and you're working on this stuff and you know Facebook ads and you know how to set up a pixel and you know all these things, wouldn't it be to your advantage to learn sales training, one-to-one sales training, and then implement that into your digital marketing? That to make your digital marketing, to think of it as if you are doing a one-to-one sale with someone, I think that would revolutionize digital marketing. And I think that's what Jason's doing. He's that's his approach. And that's the approach that we need to take, because I think the other way is kind of dehumanizing. It's, I'm gonna arrange these elements on a website. I'm gonna arrange these elements on the internet, and people are gonna see it, and then it's sort of like they go through this chain reaction, this domino effect, until they buy something of mine. Rather than, like, what would it be like to set this up as if I was actually one-to-one with this person, and having a conversation with them, which I did for 10 years as an insurance agent. And that will teach you a lot about yourself, and that'll teach you a lot about other people. And it's not a salesy thing like I'm greedy and all I can think about is you buying my product, and I don't really care about you. If you've ever been in sales, if you've lasted in sales for more than a few months, you know that that's not how that happens. You know that it takes understanding yourself. It takes understanding others. It takes getting out of your head and connecting with other people, finding out what their needs are, and then checking in. Do I have good solutions for this person? Is there something here that I have that will make this person's life better? And so now we enter into a collaboration that they're paying me, but they're getting hopefully more value than even what they're paying for. That's the idea behind running a successful business, is that you over deliver. And that's not a bad thing, but we sales is such a dirty word to people. And it does not have to be that way. And you can't run a sustainable business if you're a salesy kind of person. If you're constantly pitching stuff to people and you have no regard for who they are, what they want, you're not going to last. So if you're a salesperson and you've been in the game for a long time and you're successful, that says a lot about who you are. That says, you were interested in people. You know how to work with people to uncover what their desires are. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, because that's kind of what I wanted to talk more about in this podcast, is if we're not connecting with ourselves and we're not able to influence our own behavior, good luck trying to persuade and influence other people. I'm not saying you can't do it. You can, but you're only going to get so far. And I think that's a lot of what attracts people to NLP. They think, oh yeah, I'm going to learn these techniques and I'm just going to go and do this thing to someone. And there's a lot of people, there's a seduction side of NLP. There's definitely that component. And I think a lot of men are attracted to NLP because that's what they're thinking. And I'm not in any way trying to put those men down. I think that's kind of a normal, when you're much younger, way to think about it. Your women are a mystery to you. You're like, I don't know how to. I know I have these feelings, these desires, and I want to go learn some techniques to figure out how to get a woman on a date, and then the other things that follow. But hopefully, in that process, just like if you were learning sales, you start to wake up to, well, this is about connection, and that means that I have to sort of be vulnerable here too. And it's not going to be, and it can be, and there are people who do this. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there, people who are very manipulative, who are just, they can bypass the connection or they can fake the connection. And those are psychopaths, and they have them out there. But that's not how you want to approach this thing. Whether you are learning NLP for dating, having more friends, doing better in sales, being able to manage your employees better and motivate them, you're going to have to connect with them. There's just no other way around it. Unless if you want to go the psychopath route, it's eventually going to fall apart. And some people can carry this on for a long time. That's what we call cult leaders. So at some point you have to actually connect with people. And so that's kind of what I'm going on and about with marketing, is that it can't just be about pushing buttons, sending it out there into the world of the internet. And, you kind of like catch a person in your net and then pull them in. And now you've got a clients and a customer base. It doesn't really work like that. I mean, it does and it doesn't. I mean, if you want something sustainable, it's not going to work that way. You want to be able to understand and connect with your clients as much as possible, even if you've got thousands out there who are on your email list and who follow you on different channels. Your job is to do your best to connect with people, to know what they need, and to help find a solution for that. And that's about connection. Before I move on to more about connection, how to do this, how to connect with yourself and influence your own behavior, and do so in a way that helps you influence other people's behavior, I want to go back to one more thing about interviewing Jason. Okay, so I won't be interviewing him here. It will not be live. It'll be something that I only get 45 minutes, and I want to make sure I get as much good information out of him during that time. So we're probably going to skip a lot of the introductions, and I don't want to feel like I'm playing to an audience. In other words, I'll cut that stuff in later. But anyway, the thing here to remember is all I did was ask. I didn't throw any sort of NLP technique at his assistant, or I didn't embed any hypnotic commands in the what I was writing. All I did was ask. And it amazes me how many people aren't even willing just to ask for what they want. I actually did a video about this probably almost 3 years ago. I've actually been really on the YouTube thing. I have a few older videos on YouTube that go back before 3 years ago, but that was really when I was working with somebody else, and I didn't know anything about YouTube, and he had just posted a few videos. But I mean, when I started actually doing videos on YouTube, I started doing a video every single day, pretty much in April of 2016. And I think early on I did a video, it probably got 50 views or something like that. And I could probably revamp the video and do it all over again and get a lot more views. But it's just basically ask for what you want. I've coached people that they want something and they come to me for help. And sometimes I'll just ask them, I was like, have you just asked for this? And so back to the dating thing, it's like, have you ever just asked a woman out? Or like, if she's the one you're interested in, just ask. Well, what if she says no? Well, you're not getting anywhere if you don't ask. It's really doubtful she's ever going to ask you. So that's one thing. And then for the sale, we're talking about persuasion, we're talking about sales. A lot of people come to me asking me to do videos on sales. I think it's something like 50% or maybe more of salespeople don't get the sale simply because they've never asked. They don't even ask for the sale. They put the benefits and features out in front of the customer, and they just expect the customer is going to say, let's do this. That happens sometimes. If you can excite your client enough, sure, that can happen. But ask for the sale. I remember going through my sales training, and a lot of them would say, yeah, you got to ask. Like I went through, I remember doing appointments, and I was kind of nervous because it was new to me. I actually didn't know insurance that well, except for more like an academic understanding of insurance. And here I am suddenly meeting people I've never met before, and I'm asking them all about their finances and their health and just all these things. And then at the end, I propose a solution, and I felt exhausted by that point, where I was just like, okay, now it's, I guess I felt like I was handing it off to the client to say, okay, now, it's your turn to do the rest. You got to ask. I lost sales because I didn't even just ask for it. And not only ask like once, they say it's something like an average of you have to ask 6 times. Now, not in the same way. You don't say, would you buy? Would you buy? Would you buy? You have to actually frame it in different ways so it's not so repetitive. But and also shutting up. Like that was another thing that I had to learn, because I would talk myself out of a sale. I would put everything out there. It looked like the person was going to do it. And instead of just saying, all right, are we ready to do this? And then just shutting up, I would actually ask for the sale, and I couldn't handle the awkward silence that would follow. And this is another mistake a lot of young salespeople make. I'll say young, inexperienced salespeople make. Because I couldn't deal with the awkward silence after asking for the sale. And you know what awkward silences feel like. That moment where like nobody's talking, and so you feel the need to fill in the silence. Like that right there. Notice that I paused purposefully to demonstrate what I'm talking about. And I just did it again. And it just feels like you're waiting for me to say something. And I feel like, oh, I got to keep talking because there's people out there listening. And if I pause or talk too slowly, I'm going to lose all of you. And that's just not true. The truth is, actually, you probably leaned in and started listening a little bit more. I actually had to train myself to do that. I had to get a metronome and set it to, I think, like 75 beats per minute, I think. I can't remember exactly. It's been years. And every morning, so I could slow myself down, I would talk and pause at every beat to the metronome. And what this helped in doing was I could slow down, talk with more space and cadence. And this gets people to listen up a little more. And also you can tell I'm lowering my tone as well. I couldn't do that. And a lot of people can't do that. And you give this a try. And give it a try when you're talking to someone. Try to slow down, and you're going to be like, oh, these people are going to think I'm crazy, or this person's going to think I'm weird. Give it a try. You'd be surprised how people just, they don't think anything's wrong. They actually get kind of interested and they start to lean in. That's when you know it's working really well. But what I found is, I heard that is like, okay, slow things down, talk slowly, pace what you're saying. And then I would try to do it, and I'd be like, blah, blah, blah. I just couldn't stop. I couldn't stop talking. I couldn't slow it down. So that's when I started actually practicing it. So 10 to 15 minutes every morning before I would actually get to my office early, before my employees got there. And I would just sit in front of a metronome on a web, you can pull up a free metronome on a website and just do that. And I would practice that. And I don't know, after about 2 weeks, I really had a lot better command over the pace of my speech. And then I started using it, and none of my clients ever said, why are you talking so slowly? If I slowed down my speech, and I wouldn't do it, I wasn't ridiculous about it, but you can push that boundary. That's kind of fun. I will push that boundary even with people I don't know. I wouldn't want to push that boundary though with like insurance clients. Whenever I had my insurance business, that might get a little weird, and I don't want them to like not want to come back to my office. But with people I had just met, I would do that. On dates, I would do that. I would just I was like, I wonder how slow I can actually talk before they go, what's up with this guy? And no one ever said, what are you doing? Why? They just think that you're just have something really important to say, or you're getting intense. So you can't speak like that all the time, by the way. You will put people to sleep, or they will disconnect. And if you're working with someone in any capacity. This doesn't, when I say work, you don't have to, it could be a social situation. If you're dealing with a very visual person, you can't speak slow for a very long time. The reason for that is you will irritate them. They see images if they're very visual, and they usually see movies. And when you're talking to them, in order for them to process what you're saying, they're watching a movie of what you're saying. They're creating it as you go. If you notice, if you're talking to really visual people, unfortunately, sometimes we think that they're not listening because they'll look away or they'll look up. And what they're actually doing is they're forming a movie. Sometimes they have to do that. And it's kind of like the screen up there, like, okay, let me think about this. And you'll see them do this. People say, well, let me think about that. And they'll look up. That's typically a visual person because they're having to process it visually. And if you start speaking slowly, you're turning their movie into slow motion. Now that can be very useful, just like the same way that when we're watching a movie for drama purposes to enhance the drama, it goes into slow motion, like maybe an action sequence, and you're seeing it in slow motion. He's grabbing the gun and he's, because there's somebody who's holding them at gunpoint or something like that. And so that can work to add dramatic effect on a visual person. But if you keep that up, you will lose that person because they can't keep watching slow motion movies for everything that you're saying. They will get bored, they'll disconnect, they'll move away. The fun thing though is when you find a very kinesthetic person, and this is a very important distinction with being kinesthetic. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm very kinesthetic. And I'll say, well, how do you know that? And they'll say, well, because, before I do anything, I have to feel it first. Like if I'm going to make a decision, like, I have to feel it. Like that's how I know what decision to make. And that's pretty much everybody. Everybody is kinesthetic in that regard. I remember Steve Andreas pointing this out to me, and it was like he knocked me on the head, like the master knocking the student on the head, like, everybody feels that. Everybody has an evaluative sense of feeling, and that's how we make decisions. You don't make a decision until you have a evaluative sense of what your choices are. Kinesthetic, the way that I'm meaning it, is you actually need to have some sort of tactile or proprioceptive, or you're really tuned into that. You're tuned into the tactile, the proprioceptive. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not tuned into your evaluative feeling as well. Normally, kinesthetic people, we're all tuned into the evaluative, but the kinesthetic people tend to, like, they're a little bit slower in processing, and I don't mean this as like they're slower. They're just as intelligent as anyone else. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It just has to do with they take their time and they really want to feel things in their body. They tend to breathe deeper and slower. So when you start talking slowly and you say, I really got to tell you this, you won't believe it. The other day. And so a kinesthetic person is going to be like, oh yeah, I love the way this guy tells stories. Because what irritates them is if you speak too fast, because they're not seeing movies so much. They're wanting to feel what you're saying in their bodies. So you speaking slowly to them, you're speaking their language, and they love it. So when you put a very kinesthetic person with a very visual person, a lot of times they clash in their communication because one's irritating one because one of them is going too slow and then the other one's going too fast in their communication. So very, very important thing to be aware of when you're in any sort of persuasion situation or a situation where you want to influence someone. If you're irritating them because you're speaking too fast or speaking too slow, that's good information to know, and then you can slow things down. And if you can't slow your speech down, get a metronome or find one on the internet and practice. Okay. So ask. You would not believe the things that you think are out of reach for you that are not, or that all it would take is just asking for it. So Jason says that he asked for the sale about 26 times, and I can see how he does that. I'd like to see more of how he does that, because that's blows my mind that, or I wonder if he actually counts. He's like, all right, I'm on number 23 times I've asked for the sale. I got 3 more times to go. That just fascinates me. But I have no doubt that he does because of the way he sets up his material. So anyway, look out for that interview. I don't know when it will be published. We're doing it on Tuesday. And like I said, I'm very excited about it. I have a lot of questions for him. To me, he seems like the kind of guy that I could spend hours picking his brain, but I only get 45 minutes to do it. And the same thing about asking. Actually, children, if you ever observe children, children are some of the best persuaders and influencers because they don't mind asking. They don't mind varying up. Like when they want something, if you have children, if you have, or if you're around children, like they don't stop asking for what they want. And a lot of times they will get creative about it. My daughter is one of the most persuasive people I know. She doesn't quit. And if she comes at you dead on and you say no, then she's going to come out from the side. And if that side doesn't work, she's going to come from the other side. And she's about to turn 12 now, but she has always been that way, just really aggressive about what she wants, which I think is a great trait. It doesn't always, being on the receiving end of that, it's not always fun, but I do encourage that about her. And that was very much how I was. I had two brothers. Actually, my younger brother passed away about 6 years ago, and yesterday was his birthday. So happy birthday, little bro. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. My brothers always would say, Damon always gets what he wants. Damon just knows how to, talk to dad. He knows how to say whatever. He knows all the right words. And I got better at that for sure, but there was a very, very distinct difference between the way that I approached things when I was a kid, when I wanted something, compared to my brothers. And maybe this is where my persuasion and influence journey started. Well, of course it did. It all starts when we're kids, but at some point we get afraid to continue that. But there were definitely things that I wanted, and I was pretty determined to get them. I didn't always get them. And even to this day, we have this argument with my family. There was you got so much more when you were a kid, and anything you asked for, you got, which is not true at all. I got told no a lot. The difference is that, first of all, I asked. I know I keep harping on this, but it's so important. Like, when in doubt, I would just ask, and my brothers would not. And a lot of times I got into trouble because they wouldn't even ask for what they wanted. Instead, they would just go and do it. And then they would get in trouble because my parents would say, hey, you didn't ask. So I got better and better at setting up the scenario. And this is what Robert Cialdini would call pre-suasion, is setting the environment to get somebody to say yes even before you ask. So what I would do is, grades were really important to my parents. So I made good grades. And over the years, I got better and better at this. So it wasn't hard for me to make good grades. So as long as I was making good grades, then I wasn't in trouble. So it was doing things like that set things up to where when I asked for something, it was really hard for them to say no, because I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was keeping up with my studies, So I set the environment to be favorable for me to get what I wanted. And then when you ask, it's much easier for the person to say yes. And that's really what sales is all about. And it doesn't have to be sales. It's any kind of persuasion or influence. Is set the environment up, set the situation up, so that when you're speaking, you're delivering the presentation, and then you eventually ask. That's not even half of the persuasion. More than half of the persuasion should be about setting everything up for them to say yes, or to clear the pathway for them to say yes, and eliminate as much risk as possible with them saying yes, because that's the real reason why we say no. We fear that there's some sort of risk involved. I walk into a department store, and what do? What's the first thing that someone does? Is they walk up to you and they say, do you need any help with anything? Or are you looking for something? Or can I help you? And our knee-jerk reaction is to say no. And this has happened to me more than once. It's probably happened to you too. You say no, Then you walk 10 steps and you say, why did I just say that? I actually do need help. I actually do want somebody to help me find whatever it is that I'm looking for. But I just told the person no. And we do that. We have this sort of automated no response. And this is also good to know as a persuader and influencer is that people have that automated response. And when I'm talking about like connect with yourself, understand, influence your own behavior in order to influence others' behavior. Well, it's a good idea to tap into why do you do that? Why do you say no immediately without even knowing what the person's doing? I mean, the person's trying to help you, and you're saying no, I don't need anything when you actually do. Did you intentionally lie to that person? No, it's just a pattern that you have. Well, what is the pattern about? Well, the pattern's probably about you don't want to be hassled. You don't want to be sold anything. But if the person can genuinely help you, and even if that is to tell you they don't have what you're looking for, well, you just saved yourself a lot of time of poking around a store that doesn't have what you're looking for. But a person who works there asking you if they can help you could actually help you do that and save yourself some time. So getting in touch with your automated responses to say no will help you when you're working with clients or anyone who you want to persuade is knowing why do you say no when you say no? And that's probably the same thing that's going on with your client. And why are they saying no? So connecting with yourself, understanding your own psychology, understanding the patterns that you follow, and being able to influence those patterns, being able to influence your own behavior is really to me which what we should be doing before we become salespeople or persuaders or influencers. But the truth is that we're actually doing this all the time. We're always influencing, and that's why people say, "Well, I don't, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in persuasion or influence or being salesy." And the thing is that you cannot not influence people unless there's no one around. If you're in any situation where there's people, even if you say nothing, your presence is still an influence. We can't get around it. So we might as well understand it. We might as well understand it better. We might as well get good at it. We might as well bring a lot of these unconscious patterns and processes into consciousness so we can understand them better. And when we do that, we become less of the salesy type. The salesy type is the person who doesn't really understand what's going on here, but they know they want something and they're not considering the other person. They're more living in their own head and they're just after what they want. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for either person. It's more like just give me, and the other person's like, well, okay, if you harass me enough, I might give you what you want, but I'm not going to feel good about it. And I'm certainly not going to be around you. I'm going to avoid you as much as I can. So, and here's the truth: most of us, most of the time, and be honest with yourself about this. Most of us, most of the time, are living in our own heads more than we're connecting with the world around us. Think about that for a moment while I take a sip of coffee. I put this coffee here thinking I'm going to drink it while I do this. And by the time I'm done, it's like it's still here. It's still a full cup. So I'm going to take a little break here. All right. So what do I mean? We're mostly living in our own heads. Think about this. Even when you're working, even when you're doing stuff, we're mostly sitting in front of a computer for most of us. Or, if you do manual labor, I used to, well, I don't say I enjoyed mowing the grass, but when I was a kid, I'd mow grass. Even though I was doing a physical thing, it was such a simple thing that I was doing, or even washing the dishes. It's like you don't have to really put a lot of thought into it. So your mind wanders, or you're in your head, you're thinking about stuff. The same thing happens unless you're doing an activity that really requires a lot of thinking and figuring things out. A lot of times you can do lots of work throughout the day with not really connecting to what you're doing. Or you can read a book, and this has happened to all of us. Go through a few pages and we're like, wait a minute, I don't even think I remember anything I just read. Your mind read it, but you can't retain anything you just read because you were thinking about other things. So we do this even when we talk to people. And this is why, like, some things in NLP are just so simple, just like paying attention to the other person, and also especially paying attention to their nonverbal. So you can listen to someone if you're having kind of a basic conversation. I mean, if you're having a conversation about philosophy or something like that, you're gonna have to pay more attention. But if you're just having a basic conversation, how was your day? What are you up to? You can tune out, like you can hear the words and you know enough of what they're saying. You can follow the conversation enough that you don't seem disrespectful, but you're thinking about other things. You're lost in your head. When I started my NLP training, it was such like a wake up, because you want to pay attention to nonverbals like breathing and tonality, and you really start to see people in a completely different way, and you really start to connect with them on the simplest things, and they feel it, and they feel that you're paying attention to them in a way that most people don't. And so immediately they feel more drawn to you, more connected to you. Now, if you're ever in these situations and the opposite happens, the person was like wants to get away from you, a lot of times that's because they're hiding something and they feel like you're looking into them deeply. So a lot of times that's actually a good thing if they want to get away from you, because they're hiding something, they're lying about something. Sometimes you can just be too intense, and like you're looking at them like you are staring at the back of their skull. And then if you're doing that, you can freak people out. So, but some sort of middle ground where you just sort of open eyes, kind of like open peripheral vision, fuzzy eyes. Well, not fuzzy eyes. That might give the wrong impression. More like open eyes, where you just like really open up your vision, and you kind of put the person in your peripheral vision so you can see more of them, and then just pay attention to these little things, the nonverbals we call them. The person will be quite drawn to you and feel connected to you, and it gets you out of your head. You're not judging them. You're not saying, well, their tonality shifted, that means this and this. No, it's you're giving them all of your attention. So when you get out of your head and you start to understand people, everything starts to change. Like you will start to pick up things about people, intuitions about people that you never caught before, and people feel good around you. They feel like, wow, this person really gives me their attention, and they feel seen, they feel heard. And you can only do that by getting out of your head. And the other thing too is you can't be judging them, because when you start judging, you start going into your own head and your own thoughts, and then you're creating a disconnect. You're drawing a conclusion. Now, the person might not get this on a conscious level, but believe me, their unconscious is getting it. They're feeling the disconnect. The mirror neurons are like shutting down. So get out of your head. And, we're, even for people who are really good at this, who are not in their head so much, they're still in their head probably most of the time. If you just got out of your head more than, say, 10%, or just increased getting yourself out of your head by 10% of your day, the changes would be unbelievable. Just that little bit amount, that little amount, you would see definite differences. And so what does it mean to be in your head? It just means being lost in your thoughts. It means evaluating things like kind of in a disconnected way, judging things, judging people. And sometimes we're just daydreaming. I mean, how many of us have our own movie trailer in our head of how great we are? I think everybody does. We have maybe, oh, we got sirens going. You wouldn't believe, in Santa Cruz, this little small town, we hear sirens, and I know this because I do a lot of recording in Santa Cruz. We hear sirens probably 3 to 4 times a day. You'd think that this little town has burned to the ground several times in a day. But anyway, so back to being inside of our heads. we've got, maybe we have songs that we like, and when we hear them, we see like the movie of our life, or we see the movie of some high point in our life, and we got the music to go to it, and we're the star of it, and this is being lost in your head. And I don't think there's anything really wrong with this, unless we start to believe that stuff about ourselves. And I've met people who really feel like they're in a movie, and the movie's all about them, and they're the star, and that's pretty narcissistic and self-indulgent. And we all have a little bit of that. Some people to a lesser or more degree, but that's being in your head. And so, like I said, if you indulge in a little bit of that, I don't think there's anything that wrong with it. But if you're daydreaming like that most of the day, and then when you're not daydreaming like that, you're still lost in your thoughts, you're still judging people, you're still not associated into yourself in real time. If you know NLP, you know about being associated or disassociated. It's like, am I here? Am I like really present? And there is a value to being disassociated. When you're disassociated, you can step back and observe, and sometimes that's important, especially if you feel stuck in a problem. But most of the time, it's going to be much better for you, especially if you're in a conversation, especially if you're wanting to connect with someone, persuade someone, influence someone. You need to be present. You need to be not in your thoughts thinking what you're going to say next. You need to be focusing on that other person, and start to trust that your unconscious will sort of give you the right stuff to say, the right material to say. And if it doesn't, and there's these gaps, and there's these pauses, those can be extremely powerful. Does it create tension when you're in a conversation? Absolutely. But tension isn't necessarily a bad thing. There was one time I was in a sales appointment, and I think I had just been telling my employees when they're doing sales that they need to ask for the sale and be quiet and let the person speak next. Whoever speaks first is not going to, or is going to control the appointment. And maybe control is a bad word. But anyway, basically that if you speak first, you lose the sale. You let the other person speak first after you ask for the sale, and they're going to basically say yes. Now, that's not 100% true all the time, but that's what I was telling them to do. And then I had an appointment. I had a life insurance appointment. And if you've ever sold life insurance, you know it's one of the hardest things to sell when you are confronting people with their mortality. It takes a lot of artistry to do that and not make them run away from you. So I'm sitting in this appointment with this couple, and I see where there's something I could do for them that would help them. And I start proposing it. And then I finally say, would you like to do this today? And I was like, okay, I got to practice what I preach here. I got to be an example to my employees. And I just didn't say another word. This went on for what felt like an hour. Of course, it was probably about a minute. And a minute's a long time to be sitting face to face with two people and not saying a word and still looking at them. I mean, if you can imagine, if I just sat here for a minute staring at this camera, that would be a little weird. But this is face to face. And so I sat there and I waited and waited and waited, and this just went on and on and on. And I was like, I felt there was so much tension building in the room that finally it broke, but I didn't break it. I let her break it. And she said, okay, let's do it. And I got the sale. So tension's not always a bad thing. Anyway, we're already at 45 minutes here. Let's see. Where do I want to go with this? Do I want to keep going, or do I want to answer questions? Let's see. Also, I want to say, I know I'm supposed to be doing this more, but I haven't been very good at it. If you're serious about this stuff, everything I'm talking about, not just the influence, but also setting goals, creating a vision for your life, achieving that vision, I have a membership program. We're running a special right now. It's not going to last. April 1st, we're stopping this promotion that we're doing right now. It's for $1 you can get started for $1. It's a monthly, ongoing, continuous membership program. I don't teach NLP specifically. What I do is I use NLP to directly apply it, and I show you how to do this. I mean, it's basically, here's how we're going to set goals. Here's how you're going to create your vision. Here's how you're going to get what you want this year, basically. And here's some techniques to apply to what you're wanting to make sure that that happens. And there's also group coaching calls that we do. We're building this community of people who want to get what they want. And you're going to learn NLP in the process by default, sort of, because we're using NLP techniques. But it's not like, okay, here's this pattern, and I'm going to teach you all the parts of it. It's more like, here's how to apply this pattern right away. So anyway, so if you want to get in on this, especially if you want to get started for $1, there is a link both in Facebook and on YouTube. There's a link there in the description. You can get started right now. You get access to the first module immediately, and then you get lessons every single month, and it just builds and builds on itself. And the people in the group, they're starting to say, wow, this stuff really works. And it's like, yes, if you organize it well. That's the other piece to this, is that you go to an NLP training and they just throw a lot of stuff at you. Even in an NLP book, you're just learning all this stuff, and then you're kind of like, well, how do I put this all together, and how do I apply it? So the membership program it's all about that. It's not so much about learning NLP. It's about putting it all together and applying it and making sure that it works. So anyway, check that out. Let's see. Oh, somebody from Australia was joining us. Cool. 2 a.m. in Australia. Let's see. Question about persuasion and influence. How do you remember to use multiple language patterns in a conversation? That's a great question. Actually, the thing about language patterns is you got to get it to the point where you don't have to think about it. You got to get it to the point where it naturally flows from your conversation. How do you do that? You start off with just memorizing, and what I would do is I would write them out. I would take, I would take a context in which I wanted to persuade someone, and I would start dropping in that content into these patterns, and then trying all the different ways. And so I'm really into writing, so I love writing. So I would do a lot of writing these things out, and then I would practice saying them. Some people like to learn sales scripts, and I would say that's fine, because you can sort of digest the patterns in a sales script, especially if you're using like Milton model hypnotic patterns. But eventually, you don't want to do that in actual conversation. And I used to do that, actually. I used to memorize patterns, kind of like sales scripts, and use them. And sometimes they were effective. But there, you run the risk of disconnecting from the person, because if you're reciting something, you're not really connecting with them. So just know that. But I think that's okay in the beginning. If you're learning, you can sort of use that, but don't continue with that. It's a crutch. So just internalize the patterns as much as possible, and just reshape the way that you communicate. You're communicating a certain way because that's how you learned how to communicate, and that's just the way that you do it. So if you learned it one way, then you can change it and learn it a different way. They started modeling Milton Erickson, when Richard Bandler and John Grinder started modeling Milton Erickson. Milton didn't like sit down and map all this stuff out and say, this is what I do. And that's why Bandler and Grinder went there. They wanted to model what he was doing. He didn't know how he was necessarily doing. I mean, some things he did, but he didn't really understand all the pieces that made him very persuasive, all the language patterns that made him persuasive. So that's just the way that he had formulated his way of speaking and communicating, because it got him what he wanted. So that's a lot of how a lot of this is forged when we're kids. We see what works, we see what gets us what we want, and so we keep using it, even to the point when it's not getting us what we want. It's just habitual at that point. So you've got to break some of these habits. And so learning these new language patterns is a way to break these habits. Is it uncomfortable at first? Yep, it will be, but that's just what you have to do. So yeah, start memorizing them first, and then start applying them. And then if you practice it enough, you will just completely internalize it. Okay. Let's see if I can pull up Facebook because I'm. See, how did you rework your voice coming from? So this is a question about my accent. That was actually not a conscious thing. Okay, so he's asking, coming from New Orleans, how did I rework my voice? Well, it was more about reworking my accent, but I did not consciously do that. But I know that I did because when I go back, people there sound more and more strange to me. So, like, or when I talk to my parents on the phone, I'm like, when did my parents start having an accent? Or when I see a person from high school or something like that, I'm like, I don't remember them having an accent when we were in high school. Um, so I think it's a normal thing. It's a normal adaptability thing, I guess, for lack of a better word. I started doing it before I started learning NLP because people started telling me, even when I first moved to Los Angeles, they were like, you don't sound like you're from South Louisiana. And so the first thing is that people in South Louisiana don't sound like they do on movies. In fact, I think they've gotten better about this, but there's a movie called The Big Easy with Dennis Quaid, and he sounds ridiculous. Like, nobody in South Louisiana sounds like that. I mean, there are people who have really heavy accents in South Louisiana, especially in the rural areas, but he just sounded like dumb. He sounded like a person who was like low IQ. Let me just put it that way. That's not how people sound there. So, especially in the city, in New Orleans, you actually kind of have a New Jersey kind of accent. If you ever listen to Harry Connick Jr., like, he doesn't sound like a Cajun. And in New Orleans, it's a little bit different than like rural South Louisiana, where I grew up, and I lived in New Orleans for a while. But yeah, as a persuasive tactic, probably I just started adapting to the way people sound around me. And the interesting thing is when I do go back, because people say here in California, people say, "Oh, would you speak in that accent?" And I go to do it, and it's hard. Like, I have to start thinking about it, or I have to put some videos on YouTube of Cajun speaking, and then I can kind of like snap into it. But when I go home, I start to realize very quickly, if I want to be understood, it's easier for me to slip into their accent, which is my old accent. And so this is part of pacing and NLP. If the more you talk like the person, um, pace your voice like the person, or tonality and the rhythm of the way that you speak, of course, the more connected they're going to feel to you. Like you're like them. It's familiar, and so that builds rapport. So when I'm there, I'm naturally kind of just fall into the accent because it speeds up the process of communicating. They can understand me better. Otherwise, if I speak with the accent that I have now, it's like it slows things down a bit. But this is an interesting thing. So I used to be married. My ex-wife is from New England, and I met her in New Orleans, and she tried very much to mask her New England accent. And if you've ever heard the New England accent, it sounds a lot like The Sopranos, which I think they were in New York, so that's not New England, but it sounds very similar. I think, were they? I don't know. But anyway, Sopranos, very similar. So the first time I went to New England, we landed in Boston, and we rented a car and we parked in a diner or something like that. And this person pulls up in like a security car or something like that, and he says, "Hey, you can't park there." And I was just like, "Whoa, these people really speak this way." And so I started after meeting a few people, like I don't think we were married at the time, but anyway, when I started meeting her friends and her family, and I felt comfortable enough, I actually started imitating their accent because it was kind of as a joke, but I wanted them to be on the joke. I wasn't trying to make fun of them, and being like, "Hey, I can talk like you." And I would do that, and they wouldn't bat an eye. I would say, "Yeah, we parked the car, and we went up the stairs." Now, like, okay, I know if you're from New England, you're gonna say, "Okay, we don't sound like that." I'm not in New England right now. I'm not around it enough to to really get the accent down. But when I'm around them, it's easier for me to do it. And I was doing it thinking that they would go, "Oh, okay, you're making fun of my accent, funny," but they didn't. It was like, "Yeah, oh, cool, you went up the stairs." Or you went up the stairs. So when you speak like other people, they don't hear it. And I became aware of this the first time when I was in Europe, and my friend who I was with, he was from Switzerland, and he spoke very good English, but he had an accent. And something came up where I was like thinking, well, couldn't people tell that when he was speaking English, other people in Switzerland who didn't speak English so well, that he had an accent? He was like, well, no, they can't hear my accent. They don't speak English good enough. Or even if they did, they can't hear my accent. And it just dawned on me. It was like, well, yeah, that would make sense, because if they could hear it, then they would eliminate that accent and speak just like an American, or just like someone from England. I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. There was one other example I wanted to give about this. I can't remember it. But if you can imitate an accent very well, the person will just feel like you're talking normal, even if they know you're not from. If I spoke British English like really well with that accent, and I was speaking that way to people who in England who knew I was an American, it probably wouldn't get their attention. It'd just be like, oh, he's speaking normal. Just like, and then the same thing here. If I heard somebody speaking like American English, I would just go along with it, even though I knew they weren't from here. So anyway, that is a form of pacing, imitating somebody's language. Okay. Probably went on a little too long about accents and things like that. Okay. Any other questions? I got a few more minutes. I'll answer one more question. And by the way, whenever in my membership program we do group coaching calls, we do them on Zoom, so that they're very interactive. And I actually walk people through processes. In fact, I released a video last week and I got permission. I don't normally put videos out there of me working with clients or even in the group calls, because everything's confidential in my private groups. But it was a call that it was a little, it was probably not even 10 minutes. Somebody had a question and I said, okay, well, let's work on this. And because it's Zoom, we can work one-on-one. It's very interactive. So we worked on it, and I was like, wow, this would be a good example for people to see. So I got his permission to turn it into a video and put it on YouTube. And so you can go see that right now. Actually, I think it's if you go to my YouTube channel, and by the way, if you're not subscribed already, make sure you do that. If you go to my YouTube channel, it's the main video, like where the trailer would be. It's that video. So you can see me working with someone in the group. But actually, that's a different group. That's not my membership group. But I do the same thing in my membership group. So when you show up on a call and say you're working on a lesson that I gave for that month, and you're struggling with it, or it's not quite working, then I can work with you right there to help you work through it. And so in that video, you will see me doing that. That's what makes this membership program great. If you're not investing in yourself on a monthly basis, and I mean, when I say investment, I don't just mean money, I mean time as well. If you're not investing monthly, I would say you should be investing daily in your own development. Imagine what investing in yourself does, rather than, investing in Starbucks or investing in, you have to work a job, or most people work a job. I don't work a job. I haven't worked a job in quite a while, which is really nice. And the reason why the reason why I started my own business was because I was realizing that, as great of a guy as my boss was, and he was my last boss, the last boss I had, I was really helping his dream become reality. And I thought, you know what? I want to cut out the middleman here. I don't want to go through making his dream become a reality to make my dream become a reality. I want to go straight to making my dream become reality. And that's when I opened my first business. And that has been a long journey, but I have to say it's paid off tremendously. So invest in yourself. If no one's going to invest in you like you can invest in yourself and invest in your own development. And in that process, you become a better communicator. You become more persuasive. You become more influential. You become better able to connect to yourself and influence your own behavior and transform yourself. And that's how you create, that's how you're going to create what you want, by investing in yourself and being able to influence yourself. Okay, let's see here. Can we evoke autonomy? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Let's see something. Okay, so somebody's asking if I can evoke autonomy. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, you can become more autonomous or not. Anyway, I recommend that, becoming more autonomous. So I'm not sure what you mean, but yeah, the more you can put your life in your own control and not seek outside validation and seek outside means to create what you want, but create it from the inside out, the better. The less dependent you are on people and outside circumstances, the better. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't connect with people. You have to connect with people. You can't do it alone. But dependency is different. Dependency versus connection. Always move in the direction of connecting rather than depending. But sometimes we do have to depend on people, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, so it's been an hour. I could do this all day long, except that I do have obligations and other things I need to do. But I love doing this. Like I said, I'm gonna be doing this every Saturday morning. If you want more of this, more than just once a week, and you want a real direction and a way to do all those things that I was talking about, create the life that you want to live, join my membership program. Check it out. You know, you can't really, for $1. I mean, come on. But get on the inside and see if it's right for you. And if it is, great. If not, you lost $1. Sorry, I'm keeping your $1. So anyway, I'm going to be doing this, like I said, next Saturday. And I'm actually flying to Los Angeles next Saturday, but I should be able to do this. I think I scheduled my flight back, so that I should be fine. But anyway, I'm speaking at the ACHE. It's a Hypnotic Examiners American something. Anyway, I'm speaking there. It's in Pasadena. If you're going to be there, I'm doing a 3-hour talk, like small workshop, Sunday morning from 9 to noon. It's in Glendale, I think. So anyway, check that out. If you're already going, perfect. Come and see me. Come say hi. And let's see. And then the next week, I'm going to be in Europe, which is going to be interesting. And I do plan to go live and do the same show in Europe. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but we'll make it work. Actually, really looking forward to that. Really looking forward to taking this trip. It's been a while. I say it's been a while since I left the country. It was last October. Yeah. I went to Hawaii earlier this year. That's not leaving the country, though. Okay. Anyway, yeah, get in on the membership program while you can get in for $1. That ends April 1st. Oh, thank you. I'm getting some nice compliments here. So yeah, and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you do that. Let's see. How would it be if we see NLP as ourselves driving a vehicle that is our brain and we are detached from the brain? I would say do that temporarily, but always make sure you come back and attach. You know, there's healthy detachment, and then there's all-out disassociation and lack of connection. So I wouldn't do that. I'd say play around with detachment. Find that, you know, that good place to be where you're connected but detached from outcome. And I think that's the best way to go. If you're really talking about learning NLP here, Mr. Believe is your name. It's cool. The best thing that I can say is to be playful about it, to have fun with it. And that's why our kids learn so fast. They have fun while they learn. And if you watch them, and then we get, you know, drilled into us, and usually public school or any school, you know, that you got to sit down, you got to focus, and so we take the fun out of learning. So definitely be playful when you practice NLP. You will learn it much, much faster, and you'll keep wanting to learn it because it's fun. You'll be drawn to it. You'll want to keep doing it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and sign out here. Like I said, sign up for that membership program. We'll have more interactions there, and it'll put you on the fast track to getting what you want, creating the life you want to live. And yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel, get these videos on a regular basis. And then I will be doing some really big special stuff next month that I'm not going to talk about just yet. But yeah, I'll be announcing it here. And then if you're on my email list, you'll be getting the announcement. But something big's coming. And I'm so excited. That's why I had to mention it. I told myself I wasn't going to mention it, but I did it anyway. But anyway, just look out for it. I can't talk about it right now. Anyway, that's it for me now. Have a great week, everybody. And I'll see you next week.